This week on Warriors and Company, longtime insider Mike Lofgren on what he calls the big story of our times, the deep state.
It is, I would say, the red thread that runs through the history of the last 3 decades. It's how we had deregulation, financialization of the economy, the Wall Street bust, the erosion of our civil liberties, and perpetual war.
Funding is provided by Ann Gumowitz, encouraging the renewal of democracy. Carnegie Corporation of New York, celebrating 100 years of philanthropy and committed to doing real and permanent good in the world. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. The Herb Alpert Foundation, supporting organizations whose mission is to promote compassion and creativity in our society. The John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. Park Foundation, dedicated to heightening public awareness of critical issues. The Kohlberg Foundation, Barbara G. Fleischman. And by our sole corporate sponsor, Mutual of America, designing customized individual and group retirement products. That's why we're your retirement company.
Welcome. If you've read the espionage novels of John le Carré, you know that no other writer today has so brilliantly evoked the subterranean workings of government, perhaps because he himself was once a British spy. Le Carré has a name for that invisible labyrinth of power. He calls it the deep state. And now, an American you're about to meet in this broadcast has seized on that concept to describe the forces he says are controlling our government, no matter the party in power. But Mike Lofgren's no intelligence agent, although he had a top-secret security clearance. He's a numbers man, a congressional staff member for 28 years with the powerful House and Senate budget committees. Over the years, as he crunched those numbers, he realized they didn't add up. Instead, they led him to America's own deep state, where elected and unelected figures collude to protect and serve powerful vested interests. Mike Lofgren was so disgusted, he not only left Capitol Hill, he left the Republican Party and wrote this book, The Party is Over, How Republicans Went Crazy, Democrats Became Useless, and the Middle Class Got Shafted. Now, at our request and exclusively for BillMoyers.com, he has written Anatomy of the Deep State. You'll want to read it as soon as we finish this conversation. Mike Lofgren, welcome.
Good to be here again, Bill.
This is a difficult subject to talk about. It would be easier if it were a conspiracy you're describing, but that's not the case, is it?
No, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is not some cabal that was hatched in the dark of night. This is something that hides in plain sight. It's something we know about, but we can't connect the dots, or most people don't connect the dots. It's kind of a natural evolution when so much money and political control is at stake in the most powerful country in the world. This has evolved over time.
And you call it the real power in the country.
Correct. It is a hybrid of corporate America and the national security state. Everyone knows what the military-industrial complex is, since Eisenhower talked about it in his farewell address.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Everyone knows Wall Street and its depredations. Everyone knows how corporate America acts. They're both about the same thing. They're both about money, sucking as much money out of the country as they can, and they're about control, corporate control and political control.
You said this, in your judgment, is the big story of our time.
It is the big story of our time. It is, I would say, the red thread that runs through the history of the last 3 decades. It's how we had deregulation, financialization of the economy, the Wall Street bust, the erosion of our civil liberties, and perpetual war.
You write, That the secret and unaccountable deep state floats freely above the gridlock between both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue is the paradox of American government in the 21st century.
Well, that's just the thing. The common narrative of the last 5 years, and on a superficial level it's right, is that government is broken, it's dysfunctional, it's gridlocked. Well, that's true, and that is the visible government, the constitutional government we learn about in Civics 101, and it is gridlocked. But somehow Obama can go into Libya, he can assassinate U.S. citizens, he can collect all our phone records without a by your leave from anyone. He can even bring down a jet carrying a president of a sovereign country without asking anyone's permission, and no one seems to connect the two. The failure of our visible constitutional state and this other government that operates according to no constitutional rules or any constraint by the governed.
You go on to say, though, that it's not just the executive branch that is the heart of this, that it's just one of the several constituencies that make up what you call the deep state.
Well, it's all the national security functions of the government. It's the Pentagon, it's Homeland Security, it's the State Department. It's also Treasury, because they have a kind of symbiotic relationship with Wall Street.
For one thing, they control the flow of money.
Absolutely. And that's why there's such a flow not only of money but of personnel between Wall Street and the Treasury Department. There's other aspects of government. There's a portion of the judiciary, a small portion of the judiciary, the so-called Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Courts. Most of Congress doesn't even know how they operate.
Talk a little bit more about the nexus, the connection between the national security state and Wall Street, because this is a theme that runs through your essay.
Do you know that about 30 blocks north of here, there is a restaurant that will sell you a truffle for $95,000? Also in New York, Christie's sold at auction a painting by Francis Bacon for $142 million. Now, a parallel situation with the national security state, the NSA spent $1.7 billion to build a facility in Utah that will collect 1 yottabyte of information. That's as much information as has ever been written in the history of the world. It costs $400 by the time the Pentagon finishes paying contractors to haul 1 gallon of gasoline into Afghanistan. That's a real extravagant amount of money. In both cases of the national security state and the corporate state, they are sucking money out of the economy as our infrastructure collapses. We have a tinker toy power grid that goes out every time there's inclement weather. Tens of millions of people are on food stamps. We incarcerate more people than China, an authoritarian state with 4 times our population. Does anyone see the disparity between this extravagance for the deep state and the penury that is being forced on the rest of the country? That isn't a natural evolution. Something made it happen. We're having a situation where the deep state is essentially out of control, it's unconstrained. Since 9/11, we have built the equivalent of 3 Pentagons around the DC metropolitan area, holding defense contractors, intelligence contractors, and government civilians involved in the military-industrial complex. There are over 400,000 contractors, private citizens, who have top secret security clearances.
And they are heart and soul of the deep state, as you describe it.
Absolutely.
They're being privatized, which means the power shifts from accountable officials to unaccountable contractors.
About 70% of the intelligence budget goes to contracts.
How new is this? I mean, back in 2010, the Washington Post published a stunning investigation of what the editors called Top Secret America. I mean, we have known about this, have we not?
Yes, we know about this, but the intelligence functions of the government are too important to outsource in the manner we have. It's something where absolute discretion is needed and absolute trust that they are not violating civil liberties. And to put this kind of a burden, if you will, on private contract employees is, I think, become a great disservice.
You say that you came to question this. It took you a while. It was a gradual enlightenment that took place. You were dealing with big numbers and particular details in the budgets that all of these agencies were sending to you when you were on Capitol Hill, right? You were seeing the numbers.
Absolutely.
What was happening to the numbers?
At the end of 2001 is we appropriated a lot of money, and it didn't seem to be going to Afghanistan, the proximate source of the 9/11 attacks. It seemed to be going to the Persian Gulf region, and I said, what's going on here? Saddam Hussein didn't bring down the Twin Towers. So the little light went on, and I began to sort of disenchant myself from the normal groupthink that tends to take over in any organization.
Groupthink. At some point in your essay, you talk about how groupthink drives the deep state.
It absolutely does, just as it tends to drive any bureaucratic organization.
What do you mean by groupthink?
Well, the psychologist Irving Janis called it groupthink. It's a kind of assimilation of the views of your superiors and your peers. It's becoming a yes man. And in many respects, it's an unconscious thing.
I remember what Upton Sinclair once said, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it.
That is certainly a part of it.
You describe Washington as clearly and obviously the headquarters of the deep state, but talk about some of the others who are in the game.
Wall Street is perhaps the ultimate backstop to the whole operation because they generate so much money that they can provide second careers for a lot of the government operatives. They're going to make more money than they ever dreamed they would on Wall Street. And I think a good example of that is the most celebrated soldier of the last decade, David Petraeus. What did he do when he retired? He went to Colbert Kravis Roberts, a Wall Street buyout firm with $90 billion in assets under management.
You describe him as a kind of avatar of the deep state.
He is, in a way, because he now represents both ends of it. We see now our present-day Cincinnatus did not pick up the plow when he laid down the sword.
Cincinnatus was the Roman who left his farm to become a general in the war. When the war was over, he went back to be a farmer. That doesn't happen today.
No, it doesn't. The vast majority of generals seem to end up on the boards of defense contractors.
Talk a little bit about what you call this strange relationship between Silicon Valley and the government and how it fits into the deep state.
Well, the National Security Agency could not do what it does. The CIA could not do what it does without Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley, unlike the defense contractors, mostly sells to private individuals and to companies. It's not a big government vendor. However, its services are necessary. And de facto, they have become a part of the NSA's operations. I'm sure the CEOs of some of these companies try to obscure the fact that this has mostly been voluntary for many years.
You mean the surveillance?
The surveillance.
The gathering of information on unknowing citizens.
Absolutely.
For commercial purposes, though.
Precisely. They've done it themselves, and they've assisted the NSA through a FISA court order,
Foreign Intelligence.
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So this has been going on for quite a while, yet now, like Inspector Reynaud, they are shocked to find out. But I think their main shock is that they're now starting to lose market share in foreign countries.
These moguls, as you call them, pass themselves off as libertarians. You know
they
that.
do. They make a big pretense about being libertarians and believing in the rugged individualism and so forth. But they've been every bit as intrusive as the NSA has been in terms of collecting your data for commercial purposes rather than so-called national security purposes, but they're in it just as heavily as the NSA is. And they somehow managed to get the intellectual property laws rigged so that you are theoretically subject to a fine of up to $500,000 for jailbreaking your phone.
Which means?
Which means if you don't like the carrier on your phone that the manufacturer dictates you shall have, and you change it without authorization, you don't have the right to something you bought.
Could this symbiotic and actual relationship between Silicon Valley and the government, reflecting the deep state, explain the indulgence Washington has shown Silicon Valley on matters of intellectual property?
Absolutely. People no longer necessarily own their property that they buy if they're buying it from Silicon Valley. They simply have a kind of lease on it.
If, as you write, the ideology of the deep state is not Democrat or Republican, not left or right, what is it?
It's an ideology. I just don't think we've named it. It's a kind of corporatism. Now, the actors in this drama tend to steer clear of social issues. They pretend to be merely neutral servants of the state, giving the best advice possible on national security or financial matters. But they hold a very deep ideology of the Washington consensus at home, which is deregulation, outsourcing, deindustrialization, and financialization. And they believe in American exceptionalism abroad, which is boots on the ground everywhere. It's our right to meddle everywhere in the world, and the result of that is perpetual war.
You say it is shadowy and more ill-defined. More ill-defined than what?
It's more ill-defined than simply saying Wall Street or saying the military-industrial complex or saying Silicon Valley or the corporations. It's a symbiosis of all of the above.
Here's your summing up. Quote, as long as appropriations bills get passed on time, promotion lists get confirmed, black or secret budgets get rubber stamped, special tax subsidies for certain corporations are approved without controversy, as long as too many awkward questions are not asked, the gears of the hybrid state will mesh noiselessly. Is that the ideology?
That is a government within a government that operates off the visible government and it operates off the taxpayers, but it doesn't seem to be constrained in a constitutional sense by the government.
Is there a solution to the way the system works now?
I think we're starting to see some discord in the ideology of the factions that make up the deep state. We're seeing Silicon Valley jump ship. They are starting to protest against the NSA. We're seeing the Tea Party bailing out against the deep state. They may be wrong on many economic issues, but I don't think they're necessarily wrong on this one.
So the public could be growing wise?
I think they are. There's a much more vivid debate going on in the country about surveillance ever since the revelations by Edward Snowden.
Mike Lofgren, thank you very much for being with me.
It's good to be here, Bill.
Thanks to the journalist Lee Fang, we have another revelation into how the deep state enterprise works. Writing for the Republic Report, a nonpartisan, nonprofit that investigates money in politics, he takes up that controversial trade deal called the Trans-Pacific Partnership that President Obama is trying to push through Congress with minimum debate and no amendments. Controversial because some of its provisions reportedly enable corporate power to trump representative government, even go around domestic courts and local laws. One is said to prevent governments from enacting safeguards against another bank crisis. Another, to empower corporations to sue governments for compensation if, say, environmental protections or regulations on tobacco and drugs interfered with future profits. Because of the secrecy, we don't know everything that's in the draft agreement. Senator Elizabeth Warren calls it a chance for these banks to get something done quietly out of sight that they could not accomplish in a public place with the cameras rolling and the lights on. Which brings us to two officials chosen by President Obama to lead those trade negotiations. Lee Fang reports that they received multi-million-dollar bonuses as they left giant financial firms to join the government. Bank of America gave this man, Stefan Seelig, more than $9 million in bonus pay as he was nominated to become the Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade. And this man, Michael Froman, got over $4 million when he left Citigroup to become the current U.S. Trade Representative. Now, both are no doubt honorable men. They are all honorable men. But when push comes to shove and the financial interests of huge corporations are on the table, we can only hope they will act as independent men, not faithful servants of the deep state. But given the secrecy, we may never know. According to Lee Fang, many large corporations with a strong incentive to influence public policy give executives bonuses and other incentive pay if they take jobs within the government. Among them, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, J.P. Morgan Chase, the Blackstone Group, Fannie Mae, Northern Trust. Citigroup even provides an executive contract that awards additional retirement pay upon leaving to take a full-time, high-level position with the U.S. government or regulatory body. I'm not making this up. You get a bigger incentive if you leave Wall Street to go regulate Wall Street. So it is the fox is groomed for the chicken coop, and the deep state grows fat on its prey. Coming up on Warriors and Company, a powerful new book breaks the code of dog whistle politics.
Dog whistle politics doesn't come out of animus at all. It doesn't come out of some desire to hurt minorities. It comes out of a desire to win votes. And in that sense, I want to start using the term strategic racism. It's racism as a strategy. It's cold, it's calculating, it's considered. It's the decision to achieve one's own ends, here winning votes, by stirring racial animosity. And here's a hard, difficult truth. Most racists are good people. They're not sick. They're not ruled by anger or raw emotion or hatred. They are complicated people, reared in complicated societies. They're fully capable of generosity, of empathy, of real kindness. But because of the idea systems in which they're reared, they're also capable of dehumanizing others and occasionally of brutal violence.
At our website, BillMoyers.com, remember to read the complete text of Mike Lofgren's essay, Anatomy of the Deep State, and then tell us what you think. I'll see you there, and I'll see you here next time.
Don't wait a week to get more Moyers. Visit BillMoyers.com for exclusive blogs, essays, and video features. Funding is provided by Ann Gumowitz, encouraging the renewal of democracy. Carnegie Corporation of New York, celebrating 100 years of philanthropy and committed to doing real and permanent good in the world. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. The Herb Alpert Foundation, supporting organizations whose mission is to promote compassion and creativity in our society. The John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. Park Foundation, dedicated to heightening public awareness of critical issues. The Kohlberg Foundation, Barbara G. Fleischman. And by our sole corporate sponsor, Mutual of America, designing customized individual and group retirement products. That's why we're your retirement company.
All night. So in the 1960s, Americans got a look behind the curtain of Washington. Operation Mockingbird, the CIA's plan to bait journalists with hoaxes disguised as scoops, got exposed.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Langley was laundering narratives to the press and into the public's veins. The most trusted names in news were working wittingly or unwittingly as deep state conduits of disinformation. At least 22 American news organizations, from the New York Times to Life magazine to CBS, had journalists on the CIA payroll.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
And the cover-up continues, although the lies are more blatant now.
There is no deep state.
There's no deep state. There's no great spy network who takes down presidents here.
There is no deep state, and we need to stop talking about it.
The deep state doesn't exist. Okay, the spoiler alert, there is no deep state.
But today, my staff opened the New York Times and saw this. It turns out the deep state is actually kind of awesome. Not only does the deep state exist, but the deep state is filled with people just like you and me. To prove it, the New York Times took a road trip. First stop, they visited a Star Trek lover.
First stop, Huntsville, Alabama. Sure looks like some nefarious government activity happens around here. Meet Scott Bellamy.
I am a mission manager in the Planetary Missions Program Office.
He drives a Nissan Titan 4x4. He's loved Star Trek since he was a kid.
Of course I have a favorite character. It's either Captain Kirk or Mr. Spock.
And he may have quite literally saved the planet from annihilation. They knocked an asteroid off its course, proving something that had previously only been done in movies.
Saving the world from an Armageddon scenario.
And then the New York Times visited a water administrator.
Next, we traveled deep into the swamp itself, Washington, D.C.
I am the assistant administrator for water at the Environmental Protection Agency.
She loves Pilates, making salads. Oh, and she led an operation to make our drinking water lead-free in 10 years.
That's the dream.
You want to replace your own water pipes? You got the skills to launch an asteroid-deflecting spacecraft? No. That's why your tax dollars pay experts like Radhika and Scott. Yep, the deep state is hard at work, making America great. Just because we don't know about it doesn't make it suspicious.
Oh, and then there's the wage official at the Department of Labor.
I am the Acting Director of Enforcement for the Wage and Hour Division for the Midwest Regional Office for the U.S. Department of Labor. I had to take a breath, yes.
She still eats Lucky Charms for breakfast, trains for marathons, and loves Latin dancing.
Cumbia, bachata, cha-cha-cha, you name it, I did it.
And she uses your tax dollars to get kids out of working in dangerous slaughterhouses.
So the Times says when we hear deep state, instead of recoiling, we should rally around the everyday heroes who wake up ready to dedicate their careers and their lives to serving us. The New York Times is telling you the deep state isn't an intelligence cabal interfering in elections. It's merely civil servants who enjoy dancing, Lucky Charms, and Star Trek, just like you. The deep state kills asteroids and does Pilates. They don't illegally sabotage politicians they can't control. They're too busy making salads and keeping your water clean. As a matter of fact, thank you, deep state. Funny how the New York Times didn't take a road trip to Langley or the Bureau or the Pentagon or the Justice Department. Russia collusion, the laptop, the letter, the lab leak were probably cooked up at NASA. But this man's not a NASA official. He's a former CIA officer declaring America's greatest threat is Donald Trump.
The greatest threat to the United States right now is from within. Donald Trump has broken all norms. You can't say those things, or in the past you could not, without being condemned, across the political spectrum, including from your own party. So the fact that this is now the norm is deeply troubling. And look, we're going into uncharted territory here. So, what happens if there is a contested election?
So what do we know about this guy? This CIA official was the chief recruiter to get 50 other spooks to sign onto that letter claiming Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. He's the guy. And now he's back for the bloodbath hoax and publicly announcing Trump, not Russia, not China, not terrorism, is America's top threat. The deep state's telegraphing what they're going to do. Run a PR campaign saying we should rally around the deep state because they're good old American public servants who eat cereal and exercise just like you. And on the same day, send a guy behind the CIA letter to put a big fat target on Trump's back? Because when you're the CIA and you say something's a threat, what do you think the CIA is trained to do about threats? Just getting started. Not only is Trump a security threat, he's an unstable psychopath, they say.
He uses this apocalyptic language, this violent language consistently almost on any topic. And the reason fundamentally is the true context. And the true context is his state of mind, his mental abilities and his personality disorders. He is a narcissistic psychopath. I mean, if you look at the definitions in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, he is clearly a sociopath.
Okay, so Biden's cognitive abilities are fine, but Trump's a sociopath. The deep state uses these propaganda techniques on our most dangerous enemies, like ISIS, like North Korean dictators, like the Russians. These are the same forces that are targeting the Republican nominee for president, a former president, because of his populist agenda and his inability to be manipulated. And so if someone's a domestic threat and they're an unpredictable sociopath, how do you bring in a counterintelligence operation to neutralize them? You link them to foreign powers, like the Russia hoax, and you use money to do it. Now, Trump has got to put up $500 million cash bond just to appeal his excessive fine in New York so Letitia James doesn't seize his properties.
The real problem that we as Americans need to be watching is where the money, if at all, comes from. Is it going to come from Qatar? Is it going to come from Saudi Arabia? Could it come through some back channel oligarch from Russia? If, in fact, that happens, just think about the danger that Donald Trump is putting America and our national security at risk. He will now be indebted to a foreign entity. And as a potential president of the United States, imagine if, God forbid, 1,000,000 times that he wins. Imagine the indebtedness that he will have to a foreign entity over the benefit and the needs of America.
So now they've established a national security threat foreign blackmail, and mental instability. And to make the Trump presidency even more dangerous, they warn of an impending American genocide if he isn't stopped.
He's going to come after immigrants. He's going to come after people of color. He was locking babies in cages as a matter of formal policy. He banned Muslim folks in this country as his first act as president. He will do that, and he will do even more. This is a man who likes words like poison, like American carnage, like bloodbath. Those are not metaphors. That is the intellectual and ideological universe in which he lives. One of violence, one of decay, one of death, and that is what he hopes to produce.
We're witnessing the beginning of another coup, a dark and dangerous chapter in America's here. They're combining the dictator on day one hoax with the bloodbath hoax to justify stopping Trump by any means necessary.
Let's have trial by combat.
Oh, the land of the free.
Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
We'll pause.
Protesters are in the building.
Thank you.
There wasn't anything you said.
They're gonna stop us!
They're gonna stand.
A lot of evil has been done under the name of just following orders.
January 6th was a disgrace. American citizens attacked their own government. They used terrorism to try to stop a specific piece of domestic business they did not like. Fellow Americans beat and bloodied our own police. They stormed the Senate floor. They tried to hunt down the Speaker of the House. They built a gallows and chanted about murdering the Vice President. They did this because they'd been fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth. Because he was angry he'd lost an election. Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot were a disgraceful dereliction of duty. The House accused the former president of, quote, incitement. That is a specific term from the criminal law. Let me just put that aside for a moment and reiterate something I said weeks ago. There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president. And having that belief was a foreseeable consequence of the growing crescendo of false statements, conspiracy theories, and reckless hyperbole, which the defeated president kept shouting into the largest megaphone on planet Earth. The issue is not only the president's intemperate language on January 6th. It is not just his endorsement of remarks in which an associate urged, quote, trial by combat. It was also the entire manufactured atmosphere of looming catastrophe, the increasingly wild myths about a reverse landslide election that was somehow being stolen, some secret coup by our now president. Now, I defended the president's right to bring any complaints to our legal system. The legal system spoke. The Electoral College spoke. As I stood up and said clearly at that time, the election was settled. It was over. But that just really opened a new chapter of even wilder, and more unfounded claims. The leader of the free world cannot spend weeks thundering that shadowy forces are stealing our country and then feign surprise when people believe him and do reckless things. Now, sadly, many politicians sometimes make overheated comments or use metaphors. We saw that unhinged listeners might take literally, but that was different. That's different from what we saw. This was an intensifying crescendo of conspiracy theories orchestrated by an outgoing president who seemed determined to either overturn the voters' decision or else torch our institutions on the way out. The unconscionable behavior did not end when the violence actually began. Whatever our ex-president claims he thought might happen that day, whatever reaction he says he meant to produce, by that afternoon, we know he was watching the same live television as the rest of us. A mob was assaulting the Capitol in his name. These criminals were carrying his banners, hanging his flags, and screaming their loyalty to him. It was obvious that only President Trump could end this. He was the only one who could. Former aides publicly begged him to do so. Loyal allies frantically called the administration. The president did not act swiftly. He did not do his job. He didn't take steps so federal law could be faithfully executed and order restored. No. Instead, according to public reports, he watched television happily, as the chaos unfolded. He kept pressing his scheme to overturn the election. Now, even after it was clear to any reasonable observer that Vice President Pence was in serious danger, even as the mob, carrying Trump banners, was beating cops and breaching perimeters, the president sent a further tweet attacking his own vice president. Now, predictably and foreseeably, under the circumstances, members of the mob seem to interpret this as a further inspiration to lawlessness and violence, not surprisingly. Later, even when the president did half-heartedly begin calling for peace, he didn't call right away for the riot to end. He did not tell the mob to depart until even later. And even then, with police officers bleeding and broken glass covering Capitol floors, he kept repeating election lies and praising the criminals.
Tonight, for the first time, we are hearing Donald Trump on tape in 2021 discussing a secret document about attacking Iran that he did not declassify. As we've reported, the conversation is a key part of Special Counsel Jack Smith's case against Donald Trump, and it is referenced in the indictment against him. CNN obtained and played the recording earlier this evening.
These are bad, sick people.
That was your coup, you know, against you.
Well, it started right at the
like
beginning.
when Milley's talking about, oh, you were going to try to do a coup. No, they were trying to do that before you even were sworn in. That's right. Trying to overthrow your election.
Well, with Milley, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him. Wow. We looked at him. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this. You attack, and
Hillary would print that out all the time, you know.
she'd send it, no, she'd send it to Anthony Weiner, the pervert. By the way, isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
I was just saying, because we were talking about it, and you know, he said he wanted to attack Iran and what? These are the papers. This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to figure out
declassify. See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, you know, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, it's so, look, here I have, and you probably almost didn't believe me, but now you believe me.
No, I believe
It's
you.
incredible, right?
No,
hey, bring some Cokes in, please.
Bring some Cokes in, please. That is how that tape ended. We should note, NBC News has not obtained or verified this recording, and we have reached out to the Trump campaign and legal team for comment and have not yet heard back. We got a lot to discuss. So let's get smarter with the help of our lead-off panel. Two of our favorites are here. Former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner and Neil Katyal, Department of Justice veteran and former acting Solicitor General during the Obama administration. Neil, what is your reaction to actually hearing this recording that we had heard so much about, but now we've heard Donald Trump actually saying it all?
Yeah, Steph. So apart from all the obsequious behavior on this tape, which is astounding, it's a disgusting tape. I mean, Donald Trump is charged with illegally retaining 31 very sensitive national security documents. And the tape tonight does two things. First, it explains why did he do it. Now, people have said Donald Trump monetizes everything, and maybe that's true, and maybe he was doing this to please some investor or something. I've often felt that, and we've talked about this before, Steph, that it's something much simpler, which is, you know, I saw this when I was National Security Advisor at the Justice Department. Certain people just like to kind of hold out themselves as being in the know and having special documents and stuff like that. And here, Trump on the tape says it's so cool, those are his words, that he has these classified documents. It's not so cool. These are sensitive documents that people maybe gave their lives for or risked their lives for, not just U.S. citizens, but foreign allies and the like. It's not so cool that you have these documents in your social club and you get to show them off in, to people. That's not good. And the second piece of this, what it does substantively, is it really nails the case against him on what criminal lawyers call mens rea, or criminal intent. His defense is that he's been trying to float around is, well, I thought it was declassified. I thought as the president I had the power to do so. But this tape destroys that defense stuff, because this is what that tape says. It says, quote, see, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is still secret. And remember, Trump's claim is by taking something out of the White House, he automatically declassified it. These documents were they were taken out of the White House. If his theory was right, they would have been automatically declassified. They're obviously not. Everyone who knows how to, frankly, read English knows that. But to the extent Donald Trump wanted to say I had a genuine belief in this crazy legal theory, he himself didn't have that genuine belief. And then the last thing I'd say is, that all goes to the current indictment that Jack Smith has done in Florida, which is about the illegal retention of 31 documents. Jack Smith so far hasn't charged the illegal dissemination, giving to other people classified or sensitive information. But as far as I can tell, that's what's happening on that tape. It seems like an open and shut dissemination case. And most importantly, that case can be brought in New Jersey, where that interview occurred, and would avoid any possible complications if there's a problem with the timing in the Southern District of Florida charges that he's currently facing.
Glenn, we have got a former president of the United States endangering our national security, and he is on tape doing it. Is this not the living embodiment of Trump's famous anecdote, he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and no one would care? He wouldn't lose his followers.
There are people who care. Certainly the people he is putting at risk, including, folks who are doing the national security work of our country overseas. And I think most people do care about this. And I also don't think he's going to get away with it. The power of having an audio tape in the defendant's own voice, where he's doing a couple of things. One, he's committing the crime and it's being recorded. And he is also exposing so many of the lies he told, lies that, Steph, otherwise he may have offered in court. I mean, when he tells Brett Baer things like, oh, no, I just had a pile of newspapers and magazine articles. And yet we then hear him on the tape saying, these are papers the military prepared and gave to me. That puts the lie to Donald Trump's claims, to Fox News or posts on his social media platform. So, the power of this, I would call this sort of a just press play trial. And it reminded me of cases that I handled involving drug conspiracies, where we were fortunate enough to be able to go up on a wire and we had the defendant saying things like, yeah, I'm going to need 10 kilos next Friday, when the jurors can sit there and look at the defendant across the courtroom and hear his own voice sort of convicting himself. That's some of the most powerful evidence imaginable.
All right, Glenn, well, you'll get your wish. We're going to press play and play that conversation Donald Trump had with Fox News' Brett Baer about this tape just before it went public. Watch.
According to the indictment, you were here at Bedminster on July 21st, 2021, after you're no longer president, and you were recorded saying that you had a document detailing a plan of attack on another country that was prepared by the U.S. military for you when you were president. The Iran attack plan. You remember that?
Ready?
You were recorded.
It wasn't a document. Okay. I had lots of paper. I had copies of newspaper articles. I had copies of magazines.
I know. This is specifically a quote. You're quoted on the recording saying the document was secret, adding that you could have declassified it while you were president, but, quote, now I can't. This is still secret, highly confidential. And the indictment cites the recording and the testimony from people in the room saying you showed it to people there that day. So you say on this on tape.
It says just the opposite.
That you can't declassify declassified, so why have it? is
When
what
I
the question
said
is.
when I said that I couldn't declassify it now, that's because I wasn't president. I never made any bones about that. When I'm not president, I can't declassify.
And that's what you said. You didn't
I said
declassify
that. I said no. I said I couldn't.
could
but
have
that wasn't a
declassified it.
document, Brett. There was no document.
That doesn't make much sense now to me. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, I think we're at the pants on fire start of the trial at this point. I mean, it's just not plausible. He doesn't even sound like he believes it on that tape, on that interview that you're playing with Fox News. But I think the audio tape tonight conclusively, as Glenn said a moment ago, just destroys this claim. And I want to re-echo something that Glenn said, because Glenn's been a really formidable prosecutor. He understands this, and he's absolutely right. There's no substitute for hearing this, if you're on the jury, from Donald Trump's own mouth. It's one thing to read a cold transcript or something like that, or to have someone else say, oh, here's what Trump said. It's another thing to hear the words. You're literally hearing the crime being committed. And destroying his defenses. You don't need a Glenn Kirshner to prosecute this case. You don't need a Jack Smith to prosecute this case. Anyone can prosecute this case.
Trump is going to make a determination what he thinks is great for the country and what's fair for the country. But the fact that I was able to terminate Roe v. Wade after 50 years of trying, they worked for 50 years. I've never seen anything like it. They worked, and I was so honored to have done it. Well, I did something that nobody thought was possible. I got rid of Roe v. Wade. And by doing that, it put pro-lifers in a very strong negotiating position. Nobody did a job like I did, including Roe v. Wade, bringing it back to the states. What I did by killing Roe v. Wade, which everyone said was impossible.
Former President Donald Trump taking credit, as he should, for the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which took away a 50-year constitutional right to abortion access and health care for women. That issue, once again, proved decisive at the ballot box, handing Democrats key victories in Kentucky, Ohio, and Virginia.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country.